So, welcome everybody to our April book discussion meeting, when we're going to be talking about We Measure the Earth with Our Bodies, a 2022 book by Yansom Lama, which I'm probably mispronouncing terribly. Um, we're really excited to discuss it. So, so we're just going to jump right in. Carol, hit us.
Oh, me. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Well, I looked at the title and I said, why did you choose this book? Then I started reading it, at first as a slow reading, and then I thought it was one of the fascinating books I've read. Why? Because I had no idea about Tibet. I learned so much. I didn't know that the Chinese threw it out of their land. And then I was going to give it up and then read on. And then I found out it's all about the cruelty, colonization, pining of their homeland, losing their homeland, and thought of it, well, well, the Jews were thrown out from Hungary. I have a friend who had to go also to the mountains to escape. Very similar. The Israelis were thrown to the Egyptians. And then I thought, why is the title? Well, I had some ideas. The earth was very important to the Tibetans. This nameless saint, Ku, this is a thread that ties the whole book to families and everything. Okay, and I could say a lot about the characters. Uh, Tanky, I'm interested. Did she have post traumatic syndrome? Did she have an epileptic fit when she started shaking? Anyway, in the end, this nameless scent, coup, is the thread that ties the whole families. This, okay, whatever it was made from earth. In the end, it goes back into the earth. And the whole book talks about how they prostrate into the earth. But the end interested me when Simple finally takes some earth and puts it in his mouth. So I could say a lot, but I'll let somebody else to talk.
This is, I think, so welcome, welcome, Roseanne and Rona. Sorry, we were chomping at the bit a little bit to start talking about the book, so we started talking. But I think that this is it, is that there were so many scenes that definitely feel so prescient, so very much in the now. Like there's no way that like I chose this book for this month in January, right? And that, like you were talking about, Carol, like the themes of like annexation and displacement and home and like the land speaking to you, these elements of magical realism that come into it. A lot of this again feels very, very current with everything that's going on in our world right now. Um, Hi, Roseanne.
I'm at the locker. I'm in the locker room. I'm trying to figure out how to listen, and I can't remember how to connect my headphones. So I'm sitting here trying to figure it out. I may
Oh,
lose you. So just if
okay.
I lose you, let me come back.
Okay, I will. And welcome Rona too, and Heidi. So, same as you, Carol, then I'll just talk for a little bit, and whenever anyone wants to say something, just let me know. Um, so similar to you, I knew very little about China's annexation of Tibet. I knew very, very little about Tibetan culture. I still know very little. I know that like while I was reading the book, I was also like Googling different things, seeing like what is like it took me probably an embarrassingly long period of time to recognize that certain words were honorifics, like Ashang was uncle and Shlomo was aunt and things like that. Like it took me, I was like, well, that word keeps come. Oh, oh. And I found even though I've I'm a little curious about how people found the narration, because it spans this long period of time, right? And we have a couple of different characters, and they both speak in kind of similar but different voices. So we start off in what, 1960? Is it the 60s or the 50s? 1960 is when we start. And then we kind of like go through Lamo's sort of perspective until 1962. I have so many notes. I have so many notes. 73. Um, and then we leap to 2012. And then we sort of have a little bit of back and forth. Um, Now the we measure the earth with our bodies. I found that as like you said, Carol, like a sort of almost like a callback. Like, so when they talk about the way that people prostrate themselves around the mountain, is that they bow, and then they go up to where their fingertips were, and then they circle the mountains, which is where their gods live. And then when they're displaced from the land, that this idea that they're circling the earth with their bodies in that same way, and that effort to sort of get home. That's I found that quite beautiful and just so flipping sad, so sad as well. Um, yeah.
Also, she puts in, there's a lot of suspense in this book. We don't know what happens. I thought this a very brilliant, that back and forth, back and forth. We don't know who is Dalma's mother and father. All of a sudden, Kenny is living with Alma's daughter, but we don't know what happened. Who did she marry? And then it's brilliant. She meets her father, and she's told that she was her mother's sweetheart. Well, it's a beautiful, I thought it's beautiful, beautiful book.
I agree. And like there are these questions, right, that come up that we're not really sure, like with in terms of Doma's parentage, even like when she's living with her aunt in Toronto, but the way that people are described, because um when we're being told the story in the beginning, the way that Lamo describes her sister, Tienki, is that she's beautiful. She's the beautiful one. And then as things go on, then it's like, oh, then as an adult, it's like, oh, um, what was it? She says something about how Tienki isn't beautiful like her mother was. And that might be I- and then I wondered if maybe Tienki was actually her mother, even though we'd had that foreshadowing of um Lamo's vision that she had, right? She had that vision of the little girl that she was going to have with San See, I wrote down like I have 5 pages of notes. This was as I was writing, I kept like there were passages that were just leaping out to me. And so like I have just pages and pages and like page references. I have like all these little like notes in my margins of like the sacred and the profane.
I do too.
You do too.
Do I?
It was really, thank you. It was such an amazing, something I never would have read ever on my own. And it was just brilliant. I really thought it was so timely and amongst all the other things, obvious things in the book and so on. It was just strong women
Hmm.
I mean, certain things stuck out to me besides the what was going on, with culturally and China taking over Tibet and all that. But it was just so many things came at me, women, the strong, as I said, and I just thought it was just such a wonderfully written, crafted book, Katie. I really did.
And there was one of the parts that I found really interesting was for let me get my name straight, was Poe
Yeah,
Dondup. Do you remember? So he was Sam Fall's uncle,
yeah,
right? So when Poe Dondup dies, um, which I don't think I'm ruining the story for anybody. This is because it happens early-ish. Um, the way that it's described, I loved this. It felt like such a beautiful kind of eulogy because Samphal doesn't, it's like he doesn't want to look at his uncle. And um that's Lomo Lamo describes it. She says, your mother looks like your uncle. That means we must remember him. Look, your uncle had deep-set eyes. His nose was broad and flat, like a bird in flight. His chin was small. His lips were thin. He loved to swim in the river by our camp, right alongside the buffalo. Someone told me he used to sing in a traveling opera. I didn't believe them because he rarely even spoke. But looking at his chest now, he seems like he could really sing. The tips of his fingers were almost translucent. You could see sunlight through them when he wove rope. Like this description of him, it just seemed so beautiful. Like I was thinking of like in Western Christian, Judeo-Christian Western culture with something like a eulogy at a funeral. Oftentimes we talk about what someone did, and we don't necessarily just describe them. Like it's like painting a picture of the person, of how they looked, to like sear it into the mind of Samphal and like pulling out these tiny little elements. It reminds me of those things, like those odd things that we remember about loved ones that we've lost as well, where it'll be like, oh, you know, she used to sing uh Joy to the World, when she was driving. Like these
right,
random little
right.
things that will always then connect you to that person. This idea of like the tips of his fingers being translucent, that you could see the sunlight through them while he wove rope. I just found that very, very beautiful.
Beautifully
Yes,
written.
Roseanne.
Okay, I'm in the locker room, so I have to talk whisper. Can everybody hear me?
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. In 1988, I was in Kathmandu for a week and a half, and I have to
Oh,
tell you, I never saw a camp. And I walked and I went everywhere as far as I know. I never saw a camp, which I find interesting because at one, I don't know when. I'm not sure, and but they talk about the Kupas, they're all over Kathmandu. They're all over. I would imagine they're all over Tibet. I wasn't crazy about the book. I figured it was should have been much shorter because how many times can I uh, listen to her or listen to anybody have those dreams or whatever it is that they saw. That was not my part. But what I find about Kathmandu is that I never saw camp. Now she talks about going back to the camp, and it looked so. They had houses, they had towers, they had shops. Maybe that's what I was in, and I didn't even realize it. I have no idea, but I never. And what's interesting is I never heard the word Tibet ever mentioned,
Mm,
which I find interesting.
mm.
Yeah, I never heard the word Tibet. It's fun. I went into the hills. I flew over the Mount Everest. I did all that stuff, and I never heard them mention the word Tibet.
Well,
And
and it's
That time,
wild too that,
interesting.
at that
maybe
time,
they're
it
not
was really
allowed to. I
taken
mean,
over by the Chinese anyway.
yeah.
yeah,
Pardon?
exactly. I think
So
they
we're
weren't
not
allowed.
Tibetans
He
anymore.
mentioned that in the book. Yeah, you had to forget about Tibet, and that was it. You're probably on fear of death or something. It was a.
But
She
they have a
mentioned
border. They did tell you they had a border. They were looked cross. They crossed the border for 5 minutes.
dangerous, very
Yeah, but
dangerous to
what borders
cross the
did they
border.
cross if there's no such country as Tibet anymore? Mhm.
Right.
Well, because the point was that the Chinese had taken it over and basically most of the
Exactly.
Tibetans were gone.
No, they said that there were still the monastery was still there when they went. They saw it in the distance. They saw the monks. They're still around.
It was dangerous to cross the border even
Yeah,
today.
but
Yeah.
obviously
And
to
they
the
talked
border.
about the remains of the monastery, right? They didn't talk about the monastery
Right.
being there because a lot of, again, they said, or the way that it was described, I'm definitely no expert here, definitely not in history at all. But from what the way that it was described in the book was, uh, like everything was so much was destroyed. It's this idea of like again, like
Yes.
getting well, not
Okay.
killing. There was that one line too of melting down the statues for bullets to kill us with our own gods. Do
They
you
they
remember
have
that?
that, but in Kathmandu, they have every corner has a temple, has something, and they walk around like that big, huge. When they talk about, I meant if I was home, I was going to show pictures of what they're talking about, and it's a huge thing, Buddha or whatever. But what I couldn't figure out is eh, what I thought they were the same religion. I don't know what really. I mean, I thought they're all Buddhist. I don't know. I get the impression that it's completely. They're not the same. They're Dalai Lama is not the same thing as the other monks that are in the Kathmandu in Nepal.
Well, I
So I'm
think
not
that when they
sure.
were talking about when the references to the precious one were references to the Dalai Lama, no?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But they were. But I'm just saying that when you go to Kathmandu, Nepal, there are the same. They're walking around this thing 100 times, whatever. I mean, I did. I didn't walk 100 times, but just the idea of it was so. And the flags and it felt
Uh-huh.
exactly like that. That's the way it is. So I'm not sure what the difference is. Why they had to destroy the monasteries, the Chinese, if they're
But I
all the
think that,
same. No,
like, you know what? That so very much translates across religions and cultures in terms of usurpation, right? Like that, like you think of like the Christian religions that fight in that, or like Christians, Jews, and Muslims, right? It's like there are similar roots. It's like what is from the outside, I think that someone must look at that and be like, why are you fighting over that? Like, why? Why are you fighting over that when there's so much similarities then from that? I think that with the I might be mistaken, but with the Chinese annexation of Tibet, part of that was it was trying to get rid of religion entirely, right? It's like the whole secularism instead. It's that like gods don't exist. But which is something that again comes up in our life now, right? Talking about it's not a freedom of religion so much as it is uh, a destruction of religion or like it's like I don't know. There's as soon as anyone starts telling someone else what they're allowed to believe and how to present themselves, I think then we get into
the other thing,
problems.
the other thing I noticed is that when I was in India, I stayed only in the fancy hotels. I still went out walking, but I went because I was nervous. I get to Nepal and I realized that's even the people are completely different. They do not look like Chinese and they do not look like Indians. I
Mhm.
don't know, and so I went into a, I went into a fancy place for one night, and then I went into a nothing place. Like I walked the streets and just went into a place because it was completely different. That's the part that I couldn't understand. Where did these people come from? At one point, they mentioned something like Persia or something in the thing, but I don't even know where they originally came from. They certainly don't look like anything near them, and completely different. They complete but poor. In 1988 and 1989, I mean, they're the mountains. They're poor. They live
Yeah.
with the animals I mean, I went into. They live with the animals in the house. It's clean, it's spotless, but they're living with the animals in the house.
But
The
this is it too, right? Is this
the
idea of like these values that like are like I don't want to say value judgments, but sort of that we're putting on things as well
right,
because it's not our culture, right? There's a conversation that happens
right.
probably like maybe a third of the way, halfway through the book with Doma when she's at the party. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
before she sees the coup that that they've just acquired And she's having that conversation with like three professors, or I think they're three professors. One of them anyway is her professor, Professor Wallace. And then there's Horowitz is there too. And he says at one point they're talking about it, and um, she talks a little bit about the way that they are listening to her. She says, like at one point, she says something about the value. She's talking to, oh, this is maybe at the after party afterwards, and she's talking about the value of the nameless saint to its people, and how to maybe get it back and how it could get returned. And she's talking to Horowitz. And Horowitz says, she says, what if it was taken from like a group of refugees? And he says, like very dismissively, he says, I think the refugees have have other things to worry about. And it's like he's not even recognizing her lineage, that like she might have a different degree of insight into this because of what her family went through, even though, like she says as well, like she didn't receive a lot of information from her family. But the importance of like the spiritual guidance and of spiritual practices, I feel like that gets underlined a lot. And I feel like that it's done in such a wonderful way by integrating this magic sort of into it. So, like Roseanne, you said that you were sort of done with the visions and the sort of, but I found that really interesting the way that it kept coming back and like these little like I didn't feel beaten over the head with it at all. I felt like it was like these little threads, like when Lamo almost ends up with her aunt, right? And then she has her episode that then they take her back to camp and back to her sister. Um, or with Doma when she's traveling and she hears things and she sees things and she has these certain feelings like the sickness almost because she's being overwhelmed with the proximity of the land coming closer. Like I think it's possible that for me anyway, I was really, really taken by the character of the land, like of it having its own personality and it being where the gods inhabit because I'm like cultureless basically. Like I have like from my perspective, I find it really, really interesting this idea of not taking whatever like you are kind of where you go and that the I'm not phrasing it right, but I found that she described that sense of displacement and the importance of it culturally um, really beautifully. But I also saw myself recognized as well when she was talking with the going back to that conversation that she had with the three academics, and she says they look at me as though I am a child. Um, that they can tolerate at the table as long as I know my place. You know, like this idea of like, okay, share with us, but only so much as what's palatable. And she says their eager lines of praise. This was earlier. Their eager lines of praise rise and fall within the length of a few seconds. I've come to recognize this as something of a local custom, to express enthusiasm and agreement without real interest. And that reminded me of something that I've heard from other immigrants to Canada, and also something that I heard recently describing different state personalities. The thing that was different state personalities was, oh, here people are nice, but they're not kind. And somewhere else, like say New York or Boston, they're not nice, but they're kind. So there's like this crunchy shell, but they'll like give you their left arm sort of thing. But and I think that with the being nice but not kind is this kind of surface waspy sort of smile and hi. But with this almost a, it's like the politeness taking place of sincerity, what she was seeing from these professors.
what
Which,
also
oh, sorry.
is that I can't a belief in oracles and spiritual leaders in all things that are otherworldly, like this is such a part of their life in 2025. You can understand it with the grandparents, the great grandparents, but even today, in today's world, the this is so important to them, the spiritual, the otherworldly, the deities, the oracle, that really got to me too. How could that be in today's fake news, right? I mean, whatever. I mean, how do you still carry that on? How?
Here goes. I'm telling you again. Um, I was, here goes another one. If you have ever, anybody here who's been to Rio de Janeiro, it's very, very voodoo. If you hit on like
Voodoo.
voodoo, oh my God. I happened to be there on New
Yeah,
Year's
I
Eve.
could see
On New
that.
Year's Eve, the place, the beach is covered with people giving God food on the sand. You could three
It's
course meals
amazing.
on the sand, real food, but on the sand. And they're and they have these clans, these huge groups of people who are following a girl or a man. I'm not sure exactly, dressed in a white dress, and they're smoking a pipe, and they're standing there, and she's talking or he's talking in tongues and translated to whoever's standing in line asking for advice. And then they get around and they get some music and they start to chant, and then they go crazy. You have some of the people go
Why?
absolutely
But
Why?
nuts.
isn't that true of
Why,
every
Katie?
religion? Doesn't
That's
every
right.
religion have its
Exactly.
mystics?
Exactly.
Just
Every
takes
religion
it to
has
the
its
nth
mystics, like
degree, though.
Judaism does,
Right?
Christianity does. The like I'm sure that like the belief in gods, like when that whether someone's talking through someone else, right? In Christianity, there are saints in
Right.
or there are prophets in Judeo-Christian and Muslim
Words. Right.
religion, and I think that there
St.
like
Joseph's
that's
Oratory.
kind of inherent in religion
Yeah.
itself.
They go to
This
St.
took
Joseph's
it to the
Oratory.
extreme. I
Oh,
found this very extreme, but
But they
it's what
do.
it is.
It's
yeah.
shocking.
Why it's good to learn. It's so wonderful to learn about other cultures and other people and how they live and how they feel. That's what I enjoyed about the book, even though I found it a difficult read. It was almost like I'm reading it for a course or a class. You weren't reading it for enjoyment. You were
Mm.
reading it for knowledge and
Well,
learn,
you
right,
were
Roseanne?
reading it for a class, this one right
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
Okay.
I would have liked to
That's
see
why
it.
I love chose it, because it's not just fluff or biography or historical fiction. Well, it's just not fiction, but it's like you learn. It was such a learning experience.
I
I
think that
felt like I was in university or something.
I think what she should have done, to be honest with you, is the first 10 pages or 5 pages or somewhere in the book, give a little history of what we were reading about. Because really, I found myself totally like a lot. I never knew the history, and it would have been nice if I knew the
You were
history so that
waiting for the
I
plot,
I
but
liked
there
that it
was.
unfolded the way that it did.
but she
I liked that it made us work a little bit. I think that
no, but I still didn't know the history. I
for
still
my
didn't know what happened. I still don't know what happened. I
but
still don't know why they were
there are
talking like
so
that.
many other books. Like she has a long list of references of things that she
At the end.
of her research at the end.
Yeah.
And the I think the truth of it too is that they're like for me it felt more experiential. Like we got to walk in these shoes along with her. Like when it starts, Lamo doesn't know the history. She doesn't know who these people even are who have like come into her village, who are taking over. And there's talk like they're like when we were talking about like the our perception of like the way that they may have been living, like that's also touched on there as well, where it says like just because that's what like nomads were not it wasn't a bad thing. It was like when she talks about like her uncle's history and her grandparents, she says like this was the way that we lived. Sorry, Carol.
I don't want to interrupt you. Okay, talking about the three professors. This is also one of the main themes in this book is Kenny. She's a brilliant woman, and they sent her to Kathmandu, to no, to Delhi, yes, to
Right.
in India, and
Sister.
to study to this professor to study. In the end, she feels she's always an immigrant. They're going to look at her as an immigrant. They're going to look at her as somebody who's stupid and cannot get ahead. So she comes back. Dalma, she also dreams about being a scholar. Again, the professors look on her as a Tibetan. And so, what I think, what they're looked upon as you're an immigrant, you're not going to get anywhere. On the other hand, Dalma gave up her dreams to be a scholar, to protect her family's heritage. So what I'm saying is that these immigrants are looked upon as immigrants. They're not looked upon as as Americans, or they're still looked upon as Tibetans. So I thought it's a very interesting theme. And what professors are say to her, she wants to study Tibetan culture and history, and they're thinking it's not really interesting. They don't understand how much she has knowledge and experience. And by the way, I checked, the author also had to her family also had to escape China and also from Tibet. So the whole thing, there were so many themes, so much think about. I wrote down so many quotes from this book. Anyway, I thought this is one of the themes, and maybe now people came from Jews came from East Europe to Canada. Difference was Canada accepted them and were good to them. The difference is the Chinese came, the Tibetans came to Nepal, but the Americans did not give them homes, promised. And anyway, very interesting.
Um, Heidi, I know you have something to say. Go ahead.
Well, I am an immigrant, okay? And it's true. You're always an immigrant, no matter where you come from. You're always an immigrant, and which is fine. I find Canada is much better than the States because I've lived in the States also. And there you really sort of, okay. Nobody really is interested what you have to say, where you come from, if there's any. I was never asked actually, well, where you really come from and what is it like there? And it's true. And it's still true. I find Canada is a little bit better. And I also find that the French Canadians are better than the English Canadians. I have never been invited at an English Canadian family to have a dinner or anything. And it's very strange. And as an immigrant, that's the other problem, especially here in Canada, because, they have these groups. So you always tend to go towards other immigrants because they understand you. That's all I want to say. I loved the book. I found the book very philosophical. I just loved the connection with the religion and the country and the country. I'm a country girl, I come from the mountains. So, there was a big connection there, and I totally understood them. I had trouble with the book because of those names. I never knew, is this a male or is this a female? I had really trouble. But just with reading, and getting all the people, take them apart and know where does this one go and where does this one go. But I absolutely adored the book. And the
I'm glad to hear.
language was beautiful.
I just want to say something on a lighter note. Sorry, Heidi. Did anybody except me at the beginning wonder like when she gave birth, forget the names are, she gave birth when she first was lay with what was his name, Semple. Didn't you think she had given birth when she was like 15, 16? That, and then I'm looking, it's Canada 2012 or whatever, and the daughter, is impossible. How could she have given birth in the 70s, simple, and then she had the baby after she was married? Did you think about that? That was the only lightness in the book, like how did she get pregnant? Like, this is
I think
impossible.
I think I know the scene you're talking about, and it was after I think it was she and Samphel had gone
Lay
out into
together
the
in the grass.
city and they were laying together and she felt the
Yes,
warmth of the grass and this was like or the warmth of the earth underneath her and then she like
right.
the way that she describes it is a warmth
She saw her
between
daughter. You're going to
yeah,
have a daughter.
but it was before
Now I
they
said,
had
how is that possible? It was too, like,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I had to go back and forth. I found that a little confusing. I don't know if she did it on purpose, and then later on you realized that 20 years later she had
I
the
think it
Doma.
was the way that I read it. So I feel what you're saying. I think that's something that my daughter would say. Sorry, she's I'm getting into the youth
But it
lingo now
must
that I
be
have a
because it was
teenager.
out of character with the book. The book wasn't that. The book was so, different, but that was like,
But
No,
this is
but at
it.
one point she says something. She does say that she did not lay with him. They just lay together, but they didn't have
oh,
sex.
maybe,
I
but
They
don't
definitely
remember
she
her
I
said
don't
that.
saying
know.
that, but that scene, from my recollection of that scene, they were laying together in the grass, but it was set up for like their future.
Yeah.
Like I kind of never really doubted that Samful was Doma's father.
Right. But when? That's what got me.
Yeah,
When?
yeah.
How is
Because we have this
finding?
back and forth and we have all these blank spaces, right? And
Yeah.
the way that Doma describes her childhood as well, of being like how she, like, even when we first, like have her and Lamo together, they're not together in the same place, right? She takes a phone call from her mom at that first party. A lot happens, like a lot of setup happens at that first party. And she says like how and she remembers one of the previous phone calls that they'd had and her mother breaking down because the distance, the separation is so hard because they'd always been they'd been so in each other's pockets and like
Yeah.
they
Absolutely.
were a unit, the two of them, even beyond, she said, her father, who she knew as her father then, right? Even though he never acknowledged her as being his daughter. Um, but we have all of these little empty, like these little blank places where we have to fill in, which I
Was
found
that
really
done
interesting
purposely,
too.
Katie? Was that done purposely
I
by
mean,
the
I would
author?
think so. I would think
Yeah,
so. I think that
had to have been.
because
But
that too allows for us to have this resolution once she's back and she sees Samphel and her mother's dead, right? Like this is like then we have all of these little things get to fall into place that were set up so neatly. They're all here and then
well,
suddenly
that's
it goes
why
like boom, 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 boom.
that's why her husband did not speak to his daughter whenever she called him father. He kept saying because he was
You're not my
gone for a
daughter.
year before she slept with when
Yeah,
she was
that's
pregnant.
true.
That's
Yeah.
right.
That's
So that's
true.
why yeah, yeah.
Yes, Semple asked, what's her name? Dalma, do you know who I am? And Dalma says,
A
you
boyfriend.
were my
Yeah.
mother's sweetheart.
Yeah, exactly. You were special to my mother. That's what she
That's
said.
right.
Yeah.
But that's
That's
also
right.
her impression. Like she remembers the first time she met him, right? With the
Leopard,
jaguar, the
leopard,
leopard, the
leopard.
leopard. And
Yeah.
like and then when she asks him, and I thought that was a beautiful scene between her and Samphel of
I
between between them asking like, when you first met me, were you disappointed? Is that why you went away? And he's like, he can't believe that that's what she thought because that's what he had lived with this idea of his mother having left him. And so like that they have that sort of twinned moment. And then like two then coming back to different topic, but this topic that we've discussed already again, like the presence of the land and the importance of the land, and him eating the dirt right on the border. Um, I I found that really important too.
Mhm.
I think that going to what you were saying, Rona, of feeling like you were like reading it for a class, um, I I understand a little bit what you mean
That's how I
because
felt.
like in terms of like it not being naturally necessarily a book that you would have picked up.
Right.
Um, but I found like when I first picked it up, I was like, okay, well, it was on the Giller long list and it's good to, stretch our stretch our
Absolutely.
our efforts, our reading efforts and our knowledge and everything. And I was expecting it to be a slog. When I picked up the book, I was expecting it to be a slog, and I did not find it a slog at all. I found like within like maybe 4 or 5 pages, I was just sucked right in. I was a little bit
It does
shocked when I
suck
jumped
you
to
in.
2012 in Toronto. And then, like again, it took me like a few pages, and then I sunk into that. I found it. Like, I know I keep repeating the sacred and the profane, but like this is it. Like these juxtapositions that she had of like doing cocaine and then like seeing this spiritual important statue going out drinking and like she I found Dolma's character had a really interesting arc similar to Samfel's Samfel. I'm my
Champel, yes.
pronunciation, my apologies. But in that like he sold the artifact, right? He sold the coup for money because he was prioritizing money. And then he comes back into again, like he's looking at the land. Although when his character is first introduced, even as a kid, it's money, 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 right? He has this growth. She has something
Sure.
similar where like when we first meet her, she's looking to get to move away. She wants to move out from her aunt's house. She wants to get away from her aunt's craziness. She wants to like prioritize again knowledge. And then we have at the end where she looks at that idea of knowledge as being kind of a false idol and recognizing the importance of sort of this spirituality of the sacred. Go ahead, Roseanne.
And that's where I'm literal. I'm not crazy about this stuff, but I found two things. Number one is, how did the aunt get to Canada? I'd like to know. She doesn't have a trade. She didn't have anything. I don't know how she got here. And the other thing is, because we're talking the 2000s, so it wasn't easy. And then the other thing is, how did she steal that coup? This is a wealthy family. This is a safe. There are cameras. All the
They said how she
yeah.
stole
How
it.
did she? Yeah, how did she sell it? She went to the party and knew the she figured out how to. It's that to me is like I found that
That
like
didn't bother me at all because she knew that there were no cameras there because I can't remember her name. The Lees
Is
or
it
whoever, the first
Mar Martha? Is that
No, no, well, Martha was is the like the head of the family. She's the rich lady, but it was one of her employees who the woman who had shown her the coup in the first place had said there
mm,
were no cameras in there, and the reason behind it was because of some other kind of illicit behavior that someone else partook in. That, like, in terms of suspension of disbelief, I find that a funny thing to stick on, Roseanne.
also, how did she get there? The aunt never explained how the aunt got there. Who brought her? Who sponsored her? Who did everything? That's the part I didn't understand either.
Yeah.
Well, there
No.
haven't
What
been
happened? Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Carol, and then
in
Rona.
in some museums
Okay.
in Europe, even here, there have been uh, 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 people came in and stole very famous artworks from the walls. How did they do it? I don't know. Maybe through the roof, cameras, guards, but you hear of these stolen art pieces. The difference is when today, if you try to steal a stolen piece, the dealer will look at the label, and a dealer today can tell it's a stolen piece of art, unlike the other thing. And yes, the theme here, it's really important to save these artifacts from Tibet. Yes, okay, she takes the statue back, and the statue ends into the earth. It was made of earth, not earth. Now, isn't more important to sell or give it to a museum so that everybody should see these artifacts, or should they kept and put them in and keep them? It's an interesting question.
It is, and especially because in this, sorry, Rona, I said that you were next and
Oh, it's
I'm
okay.
sticking my nose in again. But like because the statue at the end of the book is not back in Tibet, it's not in it's in Canada, it's in Toronto. It's with Chenki, right? And so the question of and two, like in terms of thievery and theft, that question totally comes up with it too, because it was it had provenance, right? It had its provenance papers when Martha Cabrizi had it, right? Like they bought it above board. However, it's one of those things I think that I would equate to the Europeans taking the land from indigenous people is that it's like this is not something that is anyone's to give. It belongs to a people. So in the same way that like she touches on a little bit about different cultures again getting their sacred artifacts back from the national museums or whatever. Um, this is like the question is that is this something that belongs to anyone? Like as much as like, yes, we might see value in looking at something and being to ooh and ah at it, and like it makes something more real to us, history more real. It's if the people for whom it's like it has a beyond cultural significance, like this is like stealing someone's God. Does that, like, how does that factor into it ethically? But then in a secular society, it's an easy thing to justify and to rationalize. That's, I think it's a really thorny question. Sorry, Rona.
No, what exactly happened to Tenki in Delhi? Like, what exactly caused what happened to her? Like, I couldn't, I know there were a lot, but what was it exactly? What was it? Memories of her mother? Did her mother, what exactly caused that? Like, she was there and then she wasn't there. Why?
Anyone?
You
Nobody
mean,
can answer.
sorry,
What?
what was the question?
With Tinky in Delhi. Like I'm currently going back into the book because I'm like, I
Yeah,
feel
I
like
know. What
I
exactly?
feel like because I definitely got swept up in the story. So like I have
Mhm.
a bunch of notes, but looking over them, like I was like, yes, yes, yes.
Yes, I agree that, but what was exactly the reason she left?
Well, because we don't really have a first person narrative from Tianqi, right? So this is, I mean, it's a little bit like life, right? Is that we have to extrapolate the details.
Oh,
In
I
the same
see.
way,
There's no,
I think, like, So I don't
It's
know.
like she had a breakdown or something. I think it was like her mother was this special spirit, and I think something happened to her. Maybe she thought she had it, or there was something that happened to her.
Who
I
was
think it
Tinky? I
was
forget.
more
Who
spirit.
was
Tinky
Tinky?
is that's the aunt.
The sister, younger sister, the
Oh,
aunt that ended up living with Dolma in Canada.
yeah.
What happened to her? Why did she become? She was so bright, and she was able to go to Delhi, and then she became a maid in Canada. Like what happened to her? Was it? I think it was something spiritual, something an inner something with her mother being that special oracle and spirit, and I think that it has something to do with that. I don't know. Does
It's
anybody have any?
I mean
Well,
it's likely. Sorry, go
well,
ahead, Carol.
Yeah,
well, they thought Kenya was a brilliant one. Maybe she was sent
right.
to Canada thinking she'd go to university and better herself. Okay, what the rift between them? Uh, her mother, her sister, tells Kenya that she marries what's his name, Jadi.
Yes.
Jadi was Kenya's boyfriend. Maybe was she
I
jealous? You
Tinky
know,
was definitely interested in him, yeah.
But
I'm
not
not sure.
Canada, Carol. I'm thinking of she went to Delhi. She was able to go to Delhi and study and everything, and she left and went back home. That's what I'm thinking, not the Canada part, the part when she was lucky enough to go. Do you know what I mean? What
Okay,
happened to her in Delhi?
she left there because all her classmates were making fun of her
Fun of her,
as an
yeah.
immigrant. Yes, and they made fun of her, and she felt as a
Yeah, that
immigrant,
could be it too. Yeah, yeah,
and she couldn't
she
do
did.
anything, so she came back.
Oh, that's
I'm gonna have to go back to that section in the book.
Remember that.
yeah, me too. You know what, Katie, I'm going to go back to that too because that's a little bit foggy in my mind.
Yeah.
But I didn't go back because I wanted to keep going in the story. I didn't want to keep going back. But that's a good idea to do that before I return the
Yeah.
book to the library. I'm going to do that.
Coming back though to another question that Roseanne had is how Tienki made it to Canada, right? But I mean, isn't she a refugee? That was my impression anyway. My impression was that she was a refugee. She had refugee status. That's how she got to Canada. And then how Dolma got to Canada was that they lied, right? They said that she was Tienki's daughter instead of Lamo's daughter.
Right.
You're on mute, Roseanne. I can't hear you. No, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
No, doesn't know. No.
Still on mute.
Yeah.
Still on mute.
No, people
There
are
you go.
talking, so that's why. No, the thing is that by the
Okay.
2012, people you have to come as a refugee. You have to have sponsors. You have to have. There was nobody, nothing. There was just she didn't have a trade. She didn't. She was no youngster when she came, from what I gather. So I don't know. That was the part, but it was really not important
In
for
her
the
50s,
story.
I think.
Yeah, it was not important for the story, but it's just that part I'd love to
I
know.
was under the impression that if someone made it to Canada and then could claim refugee status.
But she has, yeah. But how did she all of a sudden came to Canada for what? Like you say, she
Well,
left
that
Delhi.
part, it's like, again, I think it's less of if it were Tinky's story, then we
Yeah, that's
probably
right.
would have gotten more of it. But
Exactly.
because this was sort of in this story, like the important thing was her coming to Canada because of, and goes back to Amma's prediction, right? Their mother's prediction of that Tinky was really important. She had to be kept safe because she would be the one who would go across the ocean and bring their family. What Oh, I didn't write down that quote. That's another one to look up because it's interesting because there'll be something like something about it wasn't bringing the whole family or a family legacy or something like that. And so that could also be what ties in the nameless saint being there until again, like this idea of uh waiting, this interminable waiting for a homeland to come back. Mm.
I don't know
This is a
what
book to read twice,
oh, no,
Katie.
no,
Yeah,
This
no,
is a
no,
book to
definitely.
read again.
Not
no,
for Roseanne, but
no,
for like
unless,
in terms of
no.
answering questions, and definitely I think that there's like it has it's dense, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in my like I usually don't like what I like to do is I like to read a book once just all the way through and then reread it to take notes. And this one
No.
I was taking notes from the beginning. Part of it was to keep the names straight because they were unusual to me and I wanted to be able to keep them straight. And then I got swept up in the story and then I stopped taking notes for a little bit and then I was like, no, no, you have to, you're
Nobody
losing the
found
thread.
nobody found it that was very long. Like it was repetitive over and over. I mean, I found
I
that to be.
didn't, it didn't strike me as such. Anyone else?
No, I thought,
No,
okay,
did anybody notice the differences in the way she felt about men and women? Did anybody ever take the
Who's
men, I
she?
think, were with the author, she's
Oh,
in the like the men characters I found were not as were like not as smart. Like I think she respected the women more. I don't, did anybody come
well,
away
let's
with
put
that?
it.
The
I'll
male
just tell you
characters,
this much. In Kathmandu, when I was walking, I was one of the only women on the street. I don't think women still, I don't know today, but women, if you notice, she always served she, even when she was older and I mean, she was educated, she sat on the floor in front of Semple. She sat,
yeah.
everything. It's just, I don't know if it's that they think
I don't
poorly of the
remember that
women.
with Sample. I remember that
Yes,
with
she did.
with
When he sat
the
on her bed,
bureaucrat.
when he
But
sat on her bed, he sat on her bed, and she
that
went to he sat
that
on
was
her
the
tongue.
bureaucrat. That wasn't Sample.
No,
That
no,
was
that
in
was simple.
Toronto.
But no, but that was another time when they were in the house. Anyway, the point is, it's just, I guess, part of their culture. It's just, I don't think, I don't know what it is today, but women were not. I mean, maybe it wasn't. I can't say. In India, women are not were at that time very dangerous for women to be alone on the street. But in Nepal, you just didn't see them.
She touched on that a little bit too towards the end. There's a conversation that she has with Sample about like being ladylike, and he said that he never like neither her mother nor her sister ever struck him as such. They were
That's
always
right.
very open
Exactly.
and forthright. Sorry, Carol, you had something to say?
oh, about the names, I think he should have given an index of the names of who they are. I got really
That's
confused.
true.
That's it. Talk
Yeah.
about the,
That's
you
true.
know,
And who
But
was who and
they're
what was
not
what.
familiar. Yeah, I didn't know who's the father, who's uncle from who, yeah.
yeah,
It
it
would have been a
eventually sort
very
of
good
like
idea.
it comes, but I agree that an index would have been, I think, helpful for a Western audience, be it just for our unf to help us familiarize ourselves with the names and the honorifics. Um, Rona, what you said about the author's descriptions of men and women, I mean, I didn't find. I don't know that I did find that. I mean, it definitely was female centered, but the uncle features so strongly in the narrative and his storytelling, and his sort of perceptions of his childhood as well, because like Lamo's parents are there for such a brief time in the story, right? We only have them for a small period of time, even though the mother weaves her way through all the way through to the end, which
And
I
the mother
enjoyed
was
that too.
always a much more important figure to her than the father.
Well, also because of her, because she was an oracle, right?
Yes,
Like,
I
but
just felt that she gave more power to the women and the men. Some of them were like, like they were like well, the one that she married, of course, and some of the men, I felt that she just not dismissed them. That's not the right word, but I just felt that the women were more important to her. Maybe
yeah,
the
the
uncle,
men were
I
a
just
lot more
felt
ancillary to the story.
that's exactly it. I
Yeah.
don't know why. Maybe just that's her sister, her daughter. I can understand that. But that did strike me. I did think about that.
I found
For some
Sample,
reason,
but like it's interesting too, because that might also go back to something that Roseanne was saying in terms of, I mean, like a feminist reading of it might be again like the positions of women in different societies and different cultures, and that in this story, like the women do have such an impact on everyone else's lives. Because like even
that's
so
what I'm saying.
we have like we have Lamo's mother, Lamo and Tienki's mother, right, who is also an oracle. So she's like embodying a
Mhm.
god periodically. So that's an important
Oh,
element.
but the men didn't. The men
No,
didn't.
the men didn't. But we also have Sample's mother and the impact that her leaving had on his life as
Mhm.
well.
Of
And we
course.
also have then the connections between, like, it is very like matriarchal, the story. I don't know that I would say the
Right.
culture, but the story for sure. Yeah, I think I would probably choose to look at that as like a feminist telling
Yeah,
of the
that's
story because
amazing.
again,
Yeah.
it's funny. Um, a few months ago, I was part of this panel of the You've Got to Read This here at the library, and so there were four or five of us librarians who were talking about different books that we thought like that we were excited about that were coming out or that were newly released or whatever. And afterwards, someone came up to me and said, "Oh, I found it like there were no male authors. There were no male authors on the list." And I looked back at the list and we did have some male authors, but it was we definitely had more female authors than we had male authors. And I wonder if part of that, again, it's sort of like this evening out of narratives. Like it's not to say that male perspectives are not worth hearing about or like that white perspectives are not worth hearing about. It's that we've gotten so many white perspectives, male perspectives, that when we're presented with an alternate perspective, then
We see it.
there's an there's
Stands
uh,
out.
maybe more of a tendency to be curious about it because it we've heard these other stories more often. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, we're our time is up, but it's a good book to talk about.
Oh my God, I can't believe the hour went by. It's amazing, eh? This book. Are you surprised, Katie, that we were so engrossed? The truth. Did you?
I am. I mean, so I like I said, I was not expecting to enjoy the book as much as I did. Like, I thought I had a feeling like I would appreciate it, but I didn't know that I would enjoy it as much as I did, and I really did enjoy it. Um, but I did like I wasn't even halfway through and I thought, how are they going to feel about us jumping around in
Yeah,
time? How are
yeah,
they going to feel
yeah.
about us having different narrators? How are they going to
I think
feel about this
you
magic
took a
stuff?
chance, and I think you did the right thing. Really, I commend you for that. Maybe you don't think we're so stupid after all.
Actually, I thought that any of the, Heidi would not like this book.
You thought
For
Heidi
some
wouldn't like it?
I
yeah,
also
yeah.
thought
I
people, I'm so surprised that everybody liked it as much as we
except for
all did.
Roseanne. Roseanne didn't like it. But
Oh,
that didn't surprise
oh,
me
I
too
missed that. She
much.
didn't like it.
No.
She related to it though because she was actually there,
She
right?
had
So
been
she
there,
did
but then
relate.
like her, I think practical. It's funny. I feel like I'm talking about Roseanne. Sorry, Roseanne, I'm talking about you without you here. But
I think she
it's
left.
like the practical nature. It's like she can allow suspension of disbelief with like talking dogs or like sentient dogs in books, but like less so with magic. Heidi, I did think that you would like it. I wasn't sure if
Oh,
you'd.
it took me a while to get into it
Yeah,
because of I found it very disturbing. I didn't know who is who, and it took a long time. I thought, oh, they should have a glossary. Like when you
yeah, that's what we
read
were saying.
Tolstoy, you always have a big list of, well, who is who.
Yeah.
I thought that
Right.
would have been a good idea. And, I prefer linear stories more than jumping.
Yeah.
I'm getting too old for this kind of stuff. I thought it was so philosophical.
Yeah.
And as far as the concern about the women, in a rural society, usually the women have usually a much bigger role to play, and they're usually much stronger than the men.
Yeah, yeah,
If you live
yeah.
somewhere
You're
in the
right.
Alps, in the mountains, the women are really the ones that run everything.
Well, it's like in terms of the consistency of the society, right? It's like who is here versus who is going away and coming back and going away and coming back. In the society that they're describing, most of the men were somewhat nomadic, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the ones with roots sort of
The
sunk
women
in.
have to hold everything together.
Yeah.
If there isn't a
What
woman,
book did we just read? Sorry, what book did we just read about the librarians, the women in the, they were on the
The
whole
Four
had to go
Winds. The Four
what was
Winds?
it?
The
Is
Four
that with the
Winds?
women with, I don't
By
remember the name with, they brought the library books to the people, to the, poor, I forget the name of the book. I'm sure we
was it
oh,
not
read
the
it.
the
Four?
one we read that was in Kentucky or someplace.
Yeah.
Yes,
The
yes,
women
where
that
they were
ran
go.
that library up in the mountains
Yes, yes,
on the
yes.
horses.
What was the name of that book,
Months
Katie?
ago.
It was I was it not the Four Winds? I think it was the Four
No,
Winds by Kristen
it
Hanna.
was the grocery
Oh
store.
no. No, that was
oh,
the Heaven and
the
Earth grocery
grocery.
store at the
No, not the grocery
Not
store.
the
no, no,
grocery
No, no,
no.
store.
no.
Uh it was Jojo Moyes. That's what it was. It
Yeah.
was
What was the name of that book?
it was called I'm cheating. I'm cheating because I can't
You're on Google.
remember the name of it. The Giver of Stars.
That's
Was that
it.
yellow
That's it,
face?
Heidi. That's it, Heidi. That
Oh yeah,
reminded me when you
Giver of
said,
Stars.
The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes. That one.
Yeah, where the
that
women were
reminded
in the
that when
mountains.
Heidi mentioned that's what brought to mind a little bit too.
Hmm.
That book. A little, well, no, you can't compare it, but the strong rural women, the women, that kind of thing.
It's funny the
Yeah.
threads that we end up finding, the connections. Yeah.
Anyway, it was great, Katie. What's next?
They're terrific.
Yeah, she's terrific. Katie, you're
I'm
terrific.
so glad that we enjoyed it. Now, okay, so what's next? Next is the month of May. I have a calendar somewhere. Here it is. I knew I had it nearby. The next meeting is going to be a Read What You Want book club.
Okay.
So the next one is on the 6th of May. And before then, I will send out a list. So like after that, we've got we'll do three more traditional book clubs for June, July, and August, and I'll send out a list of what they are going to be. We'll predetermine them.
After
Did
this
you?
book, I'm reading Howdy Doody. That's the book I'm reading after this book.
Yeah,
Well, this is it. It's so dense that I think that I'm glad that this was our last of the traditional book club books for this little chunk so that we can then all read, like some nonsense books if we feel the need as sort of a palate cleanser, and then we'll come back to it afterwards. So thank you everybody for coming. This was a
Thank you. It was
really fun
wonderful, Katie.
discussion.
and
Yeah.
And
have a happy Passover,
oh yes,
everybody.
Yes,
happy
happy
Passover,
Passover.
everybody.
Over. So
Yeah,
yeah,
thanks to you all.
Katie,
Easter, Beltane,
Yeah,
whatever it is
yeah,
anyone
everything.
celebrates.
yes, I
So we'll
want to
see you
ask.
later. Thanks a lot, Katie.
It is my pleasure. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you all again in May, if not before.